He is the only psychologist I have anything to learn from. Friedrich Nietzsche. When you have a recommendation like that, you know it's probably going to be a damn good book. And this is what Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoyevsky is. It is a very, very good book. This book was actually published in 1866 in a series of 12 installments in a magazine. That seems to be how books were published a lot more back then. There was no single release of something. It was a full publication and series. And you can see how that, I guess, alters a little bit of the storyline and how the book is written. It does seem to be a lot more individual chapters, whereas I think books nowadays have a bit more of a ability to interweave and connect the start to the finish and write in different styles and write in, I guess, a different, longer flowing manner. Whereas this one, it definitely is, you can see like the parts in it and the cut up chunks. But that does not take anything from the book. It just gives a little bit of an explanation of why the book is written how it is. So the book was written when Dostoyevsky was 45, or before he was 45, published when he was 45. And was sometime after his exile in the Russian, like Siberia, in the tundra, in the taiga, for, I guess, political agitation in those times against the Russian Tsars. So he was in exile from the age of about 28 to 33. And yeah, in that intermediate period between 45 and 33, he wrote this book at some point. Now, he suffered tremendously in his life, and you can really see it in his workings and in what he has written. He had epilepsy. I believe two of his children died in very shortly after childbirth, or at least before he did. And it was, I mean, just for anyone back then, those times were rough. So you can really see that in his works, and he is really renowned as, I guess, someone who's managed to capture the psychology of people, but also the inner sufferings as well. So the story is of Rodion Raskolnikov, who is a student, a very, very smart person who basically commits a very terrible crime, and his subsequent psychological suffering and, I guess, his own undoing, and it sort of is a crime novel in a sense, because he does have a pursuer trying to prove that it was him who committed the crime. But it is definitely more the psychological aspect of Raskolnikov, and I guess some of his interactions with other people. I won't go through the full plot because it's a huge book, 500 and something pages. So if you want the spark notes or something, go elsewhere for that. I'm going to switch right onto the themes now. So there's a tremendous amount of themes in the actual book. There is talking about the poverty, talking about the family structure and alcoholism, talking about the, I guess, role of the state and how it can monopolize violence and all those sorts of things. But, you know, if you sat down and tried to analyze each one of those things in the book, it would just take a super huge amount of time. So I'm just going to dive into what I found were the key questions and what I personally took out from it. So one of my key thoughts from it were, do morals exist beyond the individual? And from what I can gather from this, it seems to be like a bit of a mixture between the state, so the morals of, I guess, other people and what they think, the laws, which are sort of, I guess, moral limits in a sense, and your own internal morals and limits that you draw from that. So these are going to be, you'll derive them from, I guess, your own innate preferences, potentially religion, potentially where you got your environment growing up and how that affected you, your own experiences in a sense. And there seems to be like a balance between these two. What Raskolnikov does, though, is he asks himself, does might make right, in essence? And so that is the reason why he commits a terrible crime, a murder of two people. He only intended it to be one at the start, but, you know, situations change and he ended up murdering two. And he sort of got away with the crime. Other people confessed. There was no suspicion on him particularly afterwards. And he was, I guess, contemplating, like, if I do this action, if I prove to myself that I have the might and I can do what I want, I have the power, I can become a great person. But then subsequently you see his derangement, his psychosis, his descent into hell, I guess. And you got a question like, okay, if might makes right, why does he feel so bad afterwards? One of the interesting things is, though, he never takes full responsibility for it until the very, very end of the novel, like the last couple of pages. And so this actually ties into a point I want to make with regards to Thérèse Raquin, which is another book I read not too long ago, which was, I guess, both of those books have very similar plots in the sense that there's a murder occurs, the murderers get off scot-free, and their individual descents into hell is what is subsequently comes from this. What's really interesting is Thérèse Raquin was published, I believe, a year afterwards of Crime and Punishment. So two very similar books in one sense, but with Thérèse Raquin, we can really see he's not getting into the psychological aspect of the people and trying to justify it. He's talking about their bodily reactions, their subconscious torturing them for what they've done. This one is very similar, where Raskolnikov isn't taking blame for it. He doesn't, I guess, morally or intellectually feel he's transgressed a boundary, yet he is having shivering fits. He is tormented day and night. He is almost manic, very close to insane. And so you can see the same sort of concept being applied by both authors here, which is that if you do something so bad, there is going to be reactions whether you accept responsibility intellectually for it or not, which I found really interesting, like the pushing past a transgression, and then I guess how the characters try and deal with that. What we see in Thérèse Raquin and I suppose in Crime and Punishment a little bit is they try and distract themselves by doing good deeds. In the case of Raskolnikov, in the case of Laurent and Thérèse, they basically try to distract themselves with other people, or in getting into like a mind state of numbness while walking alongside the river and stuff. And it's really in the night where their terrors come, or when they're alone with each other. So both books, there obviously is a big difference, but if you read these two books together, I think you get a real good insight into the, both authors intellectualizing of what happens when you transgress a boundary. And also, I guess, how much of our lives, it made me question how much of our lives are spent trying to distract ourselves from like the existential questions that we all ask ourselves. What is the meaning of life? Why am I here? Yada, yada, yada. So that was, I guess, one of the themes. The other one is, as I already sort of hinted at, are great men born or are they made? In the book, Raskolnikov really gets into looking at his own, in particular Napoleon. He compares Napoleon as this amazing character who, through sheer force of will, got to a position of power and then made his laws and whatever from that, justifying himself for doing that. So he's essentially saying, if you have the power and you can do something and you don't question it, if you believe it is right, and you get to that stage and then you have the influence on other people, then it is right. In essence, saying the morals of the individual is stronger than the morals of the state or other people or the outside influences. So if this was the case, why did he feel so bad afterwards, I guess? And in essence, I think what he tried to do was he tried to think himself into something that he's not. And he tried to achieve it all in, I guess, one big feat, in essence. So by committing this murder, he went from 0 to 100, really, because when he was at 0, he was a broke student with no future, a family who was destitute in poverty, living in a tiny ramshackle room of a house with just bullshit, like no material possessions, the lowest of the low, the poorest of the poor. And through this act, even though he stole money, it wasn't about the money. The whole act of killing the old lady was to prove to himself that he was a strong person, he was a great person, and that from then on, he would be able to make his own choices in life and achieve that power, and might makes right, essentially. Try and prove his own argument. In the book, he has a essay sent into a newspaper where it gets published, and it's essentially arguing why there are exceptional people, Napoleons, who through their own force of will, who through their might, they are better than the louses, the plebs, the people not even worth. They are extraordinary. There is something different about them, and that allows them to transgress beyond normal moral boundaries. So what I guess he really failed to take into account there, or what I personally believe, is he didn't realize that it also takes the practical steps. A person like Napoleon isn't born by some dude in his room thinking that he's going to be a great person, and then 2 steps later, he's a great person. No, it requires thinking that, for sure. You don't get to the position of a super, super powerful leader by not having supreme confidence in yourself and the belief that you are someone special. But it also takes the tiny little steps, which are the things no one sees, to get up to that point. You don't become a Napoleon by lounging around in your room and then just going off and killing some old lady. No, you become Napoleon by interacting with people. You become Napoleon by making yourself better, improving yourself, improving your speaking abilities, improving your tactical, your battle awareness, your, tactical skills that require you and which will make you better into a position where you are now a Napoleon. So I think that's one of the things Raskolnikov really basically fucked up. He didn't understand that a Napoleon is born, in a sense. He's got to have the natural talents and the greatness, but he's also made in the sense that he took the steps required to get to that sort of position. Whereas Raskolnikov was more on the, you're born that way, and I was born that way, so I'm going to do it, even though he realized in his own thinkings that a Napoleon just goes and does what he believes right. He doesn't question for months and days and whatever on the question of, is it right to kill this lady or not? So it's sort of like a self-imposed suffering on Raskolnikov. And while you do feel pity for him, it's also tempered with the fact that he brought it on himself. So, and he knew it was coming. So, you've got that conflicting bit where it's like, oh, poor Raskolnikov, but also, yeah, okay, this guy's a dumbass and he deserves everything he's getting. As far as my own observations of the book and the style of the author, Fyodor Dostoyevsky is a master of the monologue, and in particular parts, he really, expresses this ability. He puts pen to paper and it makes you just transfer yourself 100% into the character, into the scene, and captures your attention magnificently. What I'm especially referring to here is the part 5, chapter 4 in this book, where Raskolnikov goes to see Sonya, the prostitute, and basically unloads his burden onto her and explains to her why he did what he did. And it's not a guilt-ridden confession. It's more of a, this is why I did it. And he even sort of still believes in it when he's talking with her. It's very comparable to the scene, if you've read The Brothers Karamazov, also another book by Dostoyevsky, the scene where Alyosha is talking with Ivan, and Ivan is explaining about the crucifixions not crucifixions, but in the Spanish Inquisition, an imaginary Jesus in this scenario. And he goes on a huge monologue, and it is just riveting. You were 100% drawn into the book and concentrate only on that. So if anything, this book is worth reading just to get to that point and feel that, I guess, that intense passion that whatever it is, however he does it, he captures you immediately. And that's 2 things. So that's 2 books he's written where I've just been going like, holy crap, I don't know what this is, but this is important. It was originally meant to actually be written in the first person, and it just goes to show as well, like how many other books, how many other pieces of art, of works have not only been ruined, but also been saved by, I guess, like the quirks of fate, the peculiarities of destiny. If this book was written in the first person, from the account of Raskolnikov, I don't think it would have been as tremendous as it is. And I guess you could say, like, obviously he worked on the book and he maybe at some point realize like, oh, okay, this isn't going to work. I'm going to have to switch to the third person. But I suppose it just goes to show that a lot of pieces of work, of art, of whatever it is, it relies on those small little things, and it wouldn't be as, as effective, as famous, as well known if they didn't do this one little thing, which probably to them was just an afterthought, like, oh, whatever, I'm just going to do it this way. So in summary, it's a hard book. It's a hard and long book. I'm not going to lie. It's to get through it, you're going to have to spend a lot of hours reading, and especially with the names. Goddamn the Russian names. Petrov, Petrovich, and they'll use the diminutives and the personalized names as well throughout the book. So Rodion becomes Raskolnikov, becomes like Rayushka. There's some other characters as well where Rodenka, Dmitry is Mitya, Mitri or Mitka. And all of these characters have, for what for me seems very similar names with the K's and the Y's in it. So you're going to spend a lot of time flipping back and forward trying to remember like, oh, who was that character again? Oh, okay, yeah. They appeared in this scene, but then they didn't appear later into the book until blah, blah, blah. So, with that being said, it's also very captivating and a thoroughly enjoyable book. I would 100% recommend it if you are interested in psychology. This is the book to read. It is just jam-packed full of, there's actions of the characters, but they are very secondary to the inner workings of what they're doing and why they're trying to do certain things. So if you like psychology, there's the book to read. Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. What's something pragmatic I'm going to take from it? Well, I think I've realized I'm not really a Napoleon. I don't have any grand illusions of power, of thinking I'm above the morals of the group as well. I think it's something you need to take into account, that even if you believe something is morally amazing and this is what you should do, you probably do need to take into account what the state, what other people think of that. So, and also with that, the small actions are what transfers into the big results. So don't go pinning all your hopes on one big action or doing something, where what really makes a person, what really makes a man is doing the small little things over and over repeatedly in different scenarios, improving yourself until you get to this amazing place. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a comment if you liked it. Also leave a comment if you didn't like it. Give it 5 stars on iTunes if you are listening to the podcast there. And I'm out. Peace.